Welcome back. It is 2 o'clock. Thanks to everyone for staying with us this afternoon. Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga,
Here.
Fu,
Aye.
Harb Sheets,
Here.
Nystrom,
Here.
Rogers,
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you so much. And quorum is established. Agenda item number 18 is examination for professional practice in psychology, the EPPP Ad Hoc Committee report, and consideration of possible action on committee recommendations. The chairperson of this committee is Dr. Kasuga. Dr. Kasuga, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, everybody. Agenda item number 18 is available as a hand carry. The committee met last month due to the impending implementation of the EPPP Part 2 exam, which will be in effect on January 1st, 2026. And with that, the EPPP Ad Hoc Committee recommendation is for the board to adopt the two-part EPPP exam for licensure for the state of California effective January 1, 2026. Two, to have staff conduct an analysis of developing a California practice exam to be reported to the board's third quarter 2024 meeting. And three, to direct the executive officer to continue to work with ASPPB and communicate any barriers to licensure concerns from the board. The committee also reviewed the proposed statutory and regulatory language that would enable board staff to implement the two-part EPPP exam if the board decides to move forward with the enhanced EPPP effective January 1, 2026. And attachment C of this packet contains those proposed changes. So as part of the hand carry, there are some data that were requested during the meeting that is provided here on page 2 of 3 of the hand carry items. The first one is information regarding other DCA health boards and their exam requirements. You can review that one. Number 2, the number of active California licensees with out-of-state addresses that may or may not have sought licensure in another state. This information was requested due to portability concerns if California does not adopt EPPP. And then the third one, below is the licensing population report from the February 2023 board meeting. This report contains the current number of active psychologists and the number of enforcement cases. The number of enforcement cases is at 2.67% less than 3% out of the total active licensee population. So, so the question is this percentage a high enough number to implement a secondary exam? So some of the information that I think will be important for this discussion are attached here. The first one is the overview of the history of the EPPP Part 2. That's on page 156. We've discussed that previously in other in previous board meetings. The second one where I want to direct your attention is attachment B, which is the discussion and possible approval of the EPPP Part 2 skills exam effective January 1, 2026. And that can be found on page 252. So so 18A, which is the overview of the history of EPPP, is for informational purposes only. No action is required for this action item. Does any of the board members have any comments or questions for item 18A? I'm looking and I don't see any hands raised. Um, let's open it up for public comments on item 18A, the overview of history of the EPPP. Madam Moderator, if
Sure.
you can just quickly see if ask for a show of hands so we can manage the number of public comments and provide time allotment.
Point of order, Dr. Kasuga. This is Seiran. I didn't have a chance to raise my hand.
Oh,
Can I
sorry.
ask you a question before we go to public comment?
Of course.
How would you like us to approach item 18? Do you want us to go item by item, like A, B, C, etc., or do you excuse me, just A and B? But our packets have a C on them. So do you want us to do each? Like, do you want to do A first, then B first, or do you want to? Are you taking both items on right now?
So my plan is to just like I guess that's a good idea to actually just go through all three. So why don't we just go ahead and do that? I think that's like best way to have a good flow so we don't have to stop in between.
So, just for clarification, you are taking item 18 and all the sub items underneath it in one go. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. If that's the case, if it's helpful, I would, before we get to public comment, I actually would like to make a motion that the board adopts the EPPP ad hoc committee's recommendation to adopt the two-part EPPP exam for licensure for the state of California effective January 1st, 2026. To have staff conduct an analysis of developing a California practice exam to be reported at the board's Q3 2024 meeting, and to direct the executive officer to continue to work with ASPPB and communicate any barriers to licensure concerns from the board.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion right now. I'll open it up for board discussion. And as part of this discussion, I think it's good to also bring up some of the things that the board staff has presented to us after the committee meeting. And one of that is the what it would look like if we don't adopt the two-part EPPP exam. And that would mean that California then would have to create its own exam because we won't be able to use even just the first part of EPPP, which is what we currently use right now. So if we are not to adopt EPPP, which will be a two-part exam coming January 1, 2026, we'll have to create our own exam. And there is a cost of that if we were to create it that is on, I believe, page 254 of the continuous packet. And also, as part of the hand carry materials, ASPPB provided what that would look like if we were to create a California skills exam just for California. But again, those options will have portability concerns because it can be used to license Californians to get a license in California. But if you are to get like a license, if the licensee wants a license in a different state, then it's not going to be recognized because it will be a California specific test. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Dr. Kasuga, this is Dr. Harv Sheets. It looks like one of the hand carries we just got answered some of the questions that our group had, which was how many people from California were involved in the development of the EPPP2. And is that what I'm looking at, where it says like 2 out of 16, the task force, and then survey participants? I think that as a group, we had a concern that California itself wasn't adequately represented on that task force. And that feels like important background information. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure that California is represented in the creation of the exam, the second part of the two-part exam. And I just also wanted to ask Ms. Moderator if you can promote Dr. Jacqueline Horn, who is from ASPPB, in case the board members have a question for from Dr. Horn.
Yes, Ms. Horn and Dr. Hao Song have been promoted so they can mute and unmute themselves when they please.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for this opportunity. This is Dr. Hao Song from ASPPB. With me here is Dr. Horn. So in terms of a number of participants from California in the development of Part 2 job task analysis, that's for both Part 1 and Part 2, that's 13%, 2 out of 16 task force member. But what's most important is the task force job analysis survey. Those are the detailed content help with the exam specification, what to measure. So that part, California people participated over 21 to 22% in both Part 1 and Part 2. So more than 1/5 of California psychologists expressed their responses to what content to measure, how much to measure. That's very important part of any assessment. And also California people participated in writing exam questions. So for Part 2, out of 46 item writers, 10 of them are from California. That's another 22%. And for the exam committee, 9 people, California are 2, so 22%. And also participated in the standard setting for Part 2. 5 out of 12 panelists are from California.
Thank you, Dr. Song. That's very helpful.
Sure.
Dr. Song, so are some of those people represented in different committees?
Yes, as I said, some are on the content kind of a delineation committee. That's the job task analysis. Those decide what content, what skills to measure, and how the proportion in an exam. So that's one important part of the assessment, development, construction. And then those questions, these are from psychologists in the field. They write a question. So then the review and assemble the exam. So we have many questions, but every exam can only have about 200 questions. So the exam committee decide what questions to put on the exams, and then review those items to see any kind of a potential advantage or disadvantage to people. That's California also have 2 members out of 9. That's another 22%. And also the final kind of important part is to set up a performance standard. The CUT score, we often call it. That's California have close to half of those standard setting members for part 2.
Did that answer your question, Dr. Harpsheets?
Yes, it did. It did very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board comment or question? I see Mr. Fu, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. I just want to add my comment to this, where one of my biggest concerns that has come up is around the fact that the time for development of our own exam and the cost of the development of our own exam would take longer than the process for us to be able to have a ability to license new applicants. And so one of the key things that I've heard, at least from the last over the last year, has been a real deep commitment from our licensing staff to make sure that every applicant who meets the requirements for licensure is processed and reviewed. And if they meet those requirements, they receive their license. And I think we find ourselves in a situation here where without the adoption of the EPPP as a 2-part exam in about by January 1st, 2026, there's a world where we may not be able to license anyone new for 1 whole year at minimum. If we're ambitious. My understanding from the conversations at the last EPPP committee meeting was that development of a test in a year is ambitious, but doable, but nonetheless don't expect it to be able to launch right away. And so I think the concern of not being able to license for 1 whole year as we create our own exam is concerning, and would, I think, be a disinterest in our consumer protection role of 1, making sure that we have a qualified exam, and secondly, the ability to have access to care for people. And I think that piece is why we also introduced as a committee the second part of this motion, which is around having staff understand what developing a California practice exam looks like, right? I think one of the things for me is this adoption of a 2-part EPPP exam is a stopgap, if you will, as we right-size the resources for us to assess whether or not we can do our own exam. And so not rush into a decision, but have a measured, disciplined study that allows us to make a policy decision. And I think the second part of the motion seeks to address we don't have to accept the exam as is. We should take a look at what options we have. And I think the third part of this motion for me is about making sure that our executive officer continues to relay any feedback we have. And the feedback I think that this board has provided to ASPBB and has been really crucial and has altered the some key decisions that ASPBB has made. So one of the things that we raised early on was the cost of the exam, and that the cost of the second part exam. And that was relayed on multiple occasions. And I think ASPPB really heard that concern and lowered the cost of the exam and has committed to not increase the cost of the exam after that date. So I think that's one example of that. And I think the other piece that has really been really crucial for us was to hear, and I think we heard from some stakeholders that this conversation of part one, part two has also opened up a conversation about when a person can take an exam. And the board is also looking to that as well about what's the right timing and what's the right opportunity for that. And I think that has been a productive conversation. And that's why the third part of this motion is so crucial. So I just wanted to take a moment to at least walk through the three-part recommendation and motion, and also make myself available to answer any questions that my colleagues have about the motion as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Fu.
This is Dr. Harp Sheets. I mean, I support what you're saying, Mr. Fu. I just wanted to kind of put part of that into some different words, and that was that when we met as a committee, we really struggled with the sense that are we having to recommend that we adopt this from a default perspective, that we really sort of felt backed into a corner because of the concern you raised that it could be an entire year where we could not license any new psychologists in the state while we were developing our own exam. So I appreciate that you included in your motion that we don't just give up on that we continue to look at that potential, but that we are recommending to adopt this, recognizing that in a sense, we're doing it from a default position, that we felt a bit backed into a corner with the realities as you described. But I guess I wanted people to understand that we thought about that and wanted to recognize that.
Thank you, Dr. Harp Sheets. Yeah, just to add to that conversation about the third part of the motion, which is to direct the executive officer to continue to work with ASPPB and communicate any barriers to licensure concerns from the board. And I truly believe that California is unique as a state, and our consumers have unique needs, and the type of licensees we need is quite unique as well in terms of diversity, and it is important for that to be represented in the exam, and that's why we ask ASPPB to provide those the number of Californians that are involved in the exam creation. So we want to continuously get information, not just on the participation of California in the test development, but also how Californians are doing in the test. As part of like the information that we are considering if we are to fully adopt this or create our own exam. I think that's important for us to continue to do our own evaluation of EPPP by our Office of Professional Examination, OPES, and then as well as look at the data that that we get from ASPPB with regards how our licensees are doing with the test with the EPPP, if there's any differential results that we're seeing. So I think that's all important information for the board to consider. Any Any other board comment? I see Ms. Sorik's hand is raised.
Yes, respectfully, just want to kind of highlight a few things for the board's consideration insofar as the second part of the motion about exploring a California practice exam. The first item is I want to draw your attention to the EPPP task force recommendations, which can be found on page 171 of the combined packet. And I'll just quote that the task force said, if ASPBB continues to make the implementation of the EPPP Part 2 mandatory and not optional, the task force had significant concerns with the loss of license portability if the board does not implement the EPPP Part 2. Therefore, the task force recommends that the board does not discontinue participation in EPPP altogether. So I want to just draw attention to item 1. And the task force was made up of representatives from not just the board, but also the training community and the school communities as well. I also want to draw attention to a couple other items, and that is the North Carolina Dental Board examiners issue that came up years ago has really brought about kind of a different perspective on when boards consider policy that may inhibit practice or be an unnecessary barrier to licensure. You know, there really is some added scrutiny to that policy decision and direction. So I want to just highlight that for some context. And lastly, the state legislature is typically not very receptive to making things so different in California that it inhibits people's ability to either come here from another state or go to another state and provide access to health care. So I just want to lay out those 3 things for a little context respectfully, and then bring it back to Dr. Kasuga.
Thank you, Ms. Sorik. Any other board discussion before we hear from the public? Seeing none, Ms. Moderator, can you please open it up for public comment? And I appreciate the public being patient as we restructure this agenda item. Please let me know like how many commenters.
Certainly. So we've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to felicitate public comment. If anyone has a comment on the issue, you can look for the question mark icon, click that, and in the text box, type comment and click send. Or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on this item? Well, I do not see any raised hands or questions. So shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
So we have a motion before us by Mr. Fu and second by Dr. Harb Sheets.
I think that was Dr. Tate, maybe.
Oh, Dr. Tate, sorry.
Yeah.
Can we call the roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Kasuga,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Harb Sheets,
Aye.
Nystrom,
Aye.
Rogers,
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. So now we're going to work on the statutory language and regulatory language. That would be item 18 B and C, or C.
Dr. Harpsheets, really quick before we move on, if I can ask Mr. Fu to help the staff create the parameters for the data points in the analysis, that would be really helpful.
Understood. So I think the parameters of the analysis would be feasibility. What would it look like to, what would a timeline look like to create our own exam? What would the potential cost be for an exam? And a recommendation from staff based on that feasibility. What creating an exam would do to have an impact on our own licensing process here.
Can we add portability to that as well?
Sure. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I think. Well, I think let me take a step back and say, for me, this is about the implementation of your own exam, right? And so the portability is about the effects of having your own exam. And if we're trying to narrow the scope of this analysis, I think talking about how to operationalize your own exam, it keeps it contained. Now, if Ms. Sorick and Madam President, you want to open up the operationalizing of this exam to also the consequences of operationalizing, I'm open to that too. I just want to make sure that I'm mindful of staff capacity and
I hear you. I hear you, Mr. Fu. I understand what you're saying. So we can keep the scope very specific.
Because I do think we have the consequences of covered in the EPPP task force report.
Yes, we do.
Did you get your answer, Ms. Sorick?
I did. Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to item 18C. Discussion and possible action regarding proposed statutory and regulatory changes required to implement EPPP two-part exam effective January 1, 2026. And for this, I would need two motions. One is to approve the statutory language text regarding EPPP two-part exam and direct board staff to seek an author. Does someone want to make that motion, please?
This is Dr. Harpsheets. I'll make that motion.
Perfect.
This is Brittany. I just wanted to be a little more specific. Do you mind if I craft a slightly different motion? It'll be a motion to approve the proposed changes to Business and Professions Code Section 2943 and direct staff to seek an author for the proposed changes. Just more specific to the statutes affected.
Perfect. That's
Yep.
great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I still make that motion.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that's a motion by Dr. Harpsheets. And can I get a second?
This is Julie Nystrom, second.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, Ms. Nystrom. This is, I think, seeking a legislative author motion. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Ms.
My-
Nystrom,
My understanding is I can make the recommendation to go to the legislature. Once it's in the legislature's body, then I recuse myself.
oh, how fun. Okay, great. We love it. This is fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. In this section, I would welcome, is it like board staff, is it Ms. Sorick or Ms. Snyder to lead us to the required language?
Ms. Snyder is prepared to lead the board through the language, and I'm here for any questions.
Perfect, thank you.
Can Evan bring up the language for us? So that we can just walk through.
And this is the moderator, and I wanted to let you know that if you'd like to enlarge the view, you do have a zoom in feature with the plus sign at the top of your computer screen. Much better, thank you.
Okay. So as far as the statutory changes, there aren't a whole lot except for, let's see. I think it's 2943. We're deleting that because it's redundant. That information is noted in 2941. And so there's no reason to have that section anymore. Does the board have any questions about the changes?
So this one is a simpler change. Most of the
Correct.
change will be coming from the regulatory.
Right. Now, do we need a motion for this, or I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, we'll need a motion to seek an author for this legislative change.
I think we jumped the gun there. I had helped Dr. Harbsheets with her motion, which would have contemplated accepting
Oh.
proposed changes
It's
to,
together.
yeah,
Okay.
2943.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You know what? I messed up my my participation in the. So I've been I lost battery and now I'm on audio only mode. I need to exit and come back. Can I do that real quick?
This is the moderator. I see no reason why not.
Okay, I'll be back real quick.
Thank you.
Technical issues. Okay, so yes, I just wanted to reiterate that the motion includes approval of statutory language on Business Professions Code sections 2940 to 2943 and direct board staff to seek an author. So
Is Julie Nystrom, I second that.
yes. And any other board comments? Seeing none, let's go to public comments.
And this is the moderator, and we are opening up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If you've got a comment on this item, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, or you can look for the question mark icon type the word comment in that text box and click send. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. Are there any comments? And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Ms. Berto, can you call the roll for the vote?
Yes, thank you. Kasuga.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harb Sheets.
Aye.
Nystrom.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Moving on, we're going to move on to the regulatory changes that's needed. I will attempt to have the motion language, and you can always modify it, but I would need a motion to move to approve the proposed regulatory text regarding the EPPP 2 on Title 16 of the California Code of Regulations, sections 1381, 1387, 1387.10, 1388, 1388.6, 1389, and 1389.1. Direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency for review. Authorize the Executive Officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process. Make any non-substantive changes to the package and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking, including any non-substantive changes to the package, and adopt the proposed regulations. Do I get someone to make the motion?
This is Dr. Harb Sheets. I'll do it again. I'll do it.
Thank you. I won't ask you to repeat it.
Thank you.
Can I get a second, please?
And this is Leah Tate.
Thank you, Dr. Tate. And I will ask Ms. Snyder to direct us to the sections that we're going to review.
Sure. So the regulatory changes, this is language that the board had already initially looked at from Pathways. So we're taking, we made the changes, we added changes from the Pathway language for to cover the EPPP Part 2. So section 1381, we can just probably go through each page unless the board wants us to review each item. So does the board have any questions, concerns on the highlighted items? Any concerns about the highlighted items?
For this page.
Yes.
I don't see any. Can we move on to the next page? So there's some changes to,
But very minimal.
Yeah, very
for
minimal
the,
here.
yes.
Moving on.
Oh,
So this one
so
is
yes, section 1388 would cover the additional exam.
any questions with regards section 1388? Let's move on to section 1388.6. Seeing no comments, let's move on to 1389. So these are sections that are removed.
Yes. And that's it.
So most of the changes is just to make EPPP like a two-part exam. So around that language.
Correct.
All right. Seeing no board member comments or questions, let's open it up to the public.
And this is the moderator, and we're opening up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If anyone has a comment on the regulations that we've gone over, you can look for the question mark icon in the lower right corner, click that, type the word comment and send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon. We do have a request for comment from Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman. And Dr. Winkleman, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you will have 2 minutes with a 30-second warning. And you're
Hello,
unmuted.
thanks for the opportunity to comment. It's Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman with the California Psychological Association. I just wanted to mention, as we've discussed in previous meetings, that CPA is co-sponsoring, along with the California Council of Community Behavioral Health Agencies, AB 282, which would streamline the process for licensure. Under that bill, we are proposing that there would be one application for entrance for being qualified to take the licensing exams instead of 3. And so this would provide more flexibility for applicants and fewer administrative hurdles to licensure, and while maintaining all the current requirements. We definitely appreciate how much quicker the processing timeframes are taking place, but there are it still takes time and delay to apply 3 times instead of once. And just to clarify, in regards to some concerns that have been raised, is that nobody would be encouraged or required to take any exam prior to their being prepared to do so. It would just give more flexibility and fewer administrative hurdles by allowing the license applicants to just qualify to take exams whenever they are ready, after having completed all the academic coursework. So if anybody has questions about that bill or needs any more clarity about that, why we believe that it will be a positive thing and not
30
be
seconds.
and be helpful and not harmful to any applicants, I'd be glad to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman.
And at this point, I do not see any further hands raised or questions through the Q&A. Shall I close the public comment feature? Oops, we do have one more. My apologies. Let's see, Jennifer Alley. I'm going to send you a request to unmute. And you're unmuted.
Good afternoon. This is Jennifer Alley, also with the California Psychological Association. I'd like to echo the comments made by Dr. Winkleman. I guess, earlier today we heard from H. Guy talking about the shortage of behavioral health providers in the state. And then we also had a very thoughtful presentation from Board of Psychology staff on what steps have been taken to address wait times at the Board of Psychology and to improve workflow and reduce staff hours. And I'm just curious if there's been an analysis of these new regulations and what impact it's going to have on wait times and the impact on delaying people to obtaining their license. Thank you.
And at this point, I do not see any other requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Can I ask board staff to respond with regards any analysis as to possible changes or effects on the wait time?
This is Antoinette. I'll start the conversation and then hand it off to Ms. Chung to provide additional input. AB 282, which we'll talk about a little bit later, at the April 7th board meeting, the board asked for an opposed unless amended position to have the position be, or have the amendment be as prescribed by the board. And while the board seems supportive of having applicants take the EPPP Part 1 earlier, which would be a knowledge-based exam, and after completion of coursework, completely makes sense that would be allowed. And again, that was another recommendation by the EPPP task force, was to be able to have earlier eligibility with the Part 1. The Part 2, there may be unforeseen consequences if an individual is made eligible to take the Part 2 and they haven't done their supervised professional experience, and that may be a lower pass score, which may be an unintended consequence. I just wanted to point out that, and then refer to Ms. Chung about timeframes for the regulatory procedures that have been laid out with the applications for each step of the process, and whether that would impact the timeframes.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. Regarding the timeframes, as I kind of briefly mentioned before, the wait time is from the receipt of document application and any materials, and then there's a processing of the any money received first by the department cashiering processing, and then the documents will come to us in queue for processing. So this is the only wait time that we have been we know that's what we have been reporting. That is the wait time, is from receipt until analyst able to review an application. So about the if any additional application will increase the wait time, our thought is that it actually provide clarity to applicants about when and which exam that they're taking and what kind of eligibility that they're getting from that application. And we hope that it makes sense for the application, for the applicants, excuse me. And thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Chung and Ms. Sorick. Any other board comments or questions before we head to the vote? I see,
Looks like Dr. Song has a hand up.
yeah, I see that too. Okay, Dr. Song?
Sure. I, as a kind of assessment credential expert, I do want to point out the Part 2 examination was targeted at people with supervised experience. So when we do those job task analysis, we task for that group of people, and also every items were written with that group of people in mind to measure their application of the skills after they got their doctorate degree with supervised experience. And the standard to pass the exam is also based on that group of people. So the validation of this exam definitely with that group of people in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Song. That's good insight into the EBBB2. Okay, anyone else? Mr. Fu, I see your hand raised.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dr. Kasuga. I do have a question just in relation to the comment and to some of this discussion here for Ms. Chung, which is, Ms. Chung, could you share with us if there needs to be, if need be, applicants, if there have been applicants who've been unclear about the process and the board's expectations, and if the proposed language is drafted to try and address these concerns?
Thank you, Mr. Fu. Yes, actually, from time to time, we receive wrong application from applicant applying for exams or a license. So we're trying to make it very clear to break the steps down for them so that they're aware, okay, I'm here, this is what I need to do, and this is what I need to provide to the board in order to seek approval for eligibility to exam. So there's a reason to why we strive to break it down really for clarity for our applicants. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chung.
All right. Any other board comments or questions? I only see Mr. Fu's hand, but I think it's left over from previews.
It's an old hand. I'm sorry.
No worries. Okay, Ms. Prato, can you call the roll for the vote?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Barb Sheets.
Aye.
Nystrom.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Tate. I'll hand it over to you. Thank you all for bearing with me, and I appreciate board staff for all the work that everyone has put into this agenda item.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga. We are taking up Agenda item 19. This is the legislative and regulatory affairs updates. And I believe we have Mr. Troy Polk.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, board members and everyone. Starting off with agenda item 19A1 for the board sponsored legislation. This is regarding the proposed fee schedule and in relation to Senate Bill 816. I'll be providing a short background and then providing a current status on it. This is an informational item. The Board of Psychology is currently facing a budget structural imbalance. Last year, the newly formed Budget Ad Hoc Committee was presented with options regarding application renewal transaction costs. On February 25th of 2022, the committee held a public meeting which presented stakeholders with the options and that these options would eliminate the board's structural imbalance. On April 29th of last year, the board voted to accept the recommendation of the Budget Ad Hoc Committee. On February 22nd of this year, staff provided the legislative proposal to the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions, as well as the Legislative Affairs Division within the Department of Consumer Affairs. On April 21st, the board was notified that Senate Bill 816, which is authored by Senator Roth, would include proposed fee increases for boards that are not currently going through sunset, and that the proposed fee increases would be included as long as there's no significant opposition to the fee increases themselves. Also at that time, minor technical changes were made in coordination with the DCA legal office. And on April 26th, the updated language was submitted to the Legislative Affairs Division within the Department of Consumer Affairs. And recently on April 8th, Senate Bill 816 was referred to the Senate floor. And at this time, board staff is continuing to monitor the bill and will look for amendments once the bill is ordered to the Assembly to see if our proposed fee increase will be included in those amendments. That includes my presentation on item 18A1, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Polk. Any board comment? Questions? I'll give it a minute. Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly. We're opening up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If anyone has any comment on the legislation presented, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment, and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 2 minutes with a 30-second warning. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And we're moving on to 19A2, Mr. Polk.
Thank you. Item 19A2, this is referring to the board-sponsored legislation in regards to the continuing education, specifically the suicide risk assessment intervention coursework in aging and long-term care in relation to Senate Bill 887. Brief background: on March 14th, 2023, Senate Bill 887, titled Consumer Affairs, was introduced, which included language that would streamline the application process to allow verification following the review of a transcript that clearly indicated in the course title that the specific coursework had been completed. Additionally, it would allow the department chair to act as additional entity who could provide written certification for convenience for applicants in cases where the course title did not adequately indicate the coursework that was completed. On April 20th of this year of 2023, the bill was amended and referred to the Senate Committee on Business, Professions, and Economic Developments. However, the proposed amendments did not impact the board's proposed language regarding the coursework. At that time, a support opposition letter was submitted to the committee. On April 24th, the bill passed the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development and was then referred to the Senate Committee on Appropriations. On May 2nd, 2023, a support position letter was submitted to the Senate Committee on Appropriations, and on May 5th, a support floor alert letter was submitted to all Senate members. On May 11th, the bill was ordered to the Assembly after passing all committees. And yesterday, on May 18th, SB 887 was referred to the Committee on Business and Professions. At this time, board staff is continuing to monitor the bill, and a position letter will be drafted and submitted to the Committee on Business and Professions. That concludes my presentation on item 19A2, and I am open for questions.
Thank you so much. Any board comments or questions for Mr. Polk on this item? Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly. And we're opening up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If there are any questions or comments on the legislation presented, you can look for the question mark icon or click the hand icon to raise your hand. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment field?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And we're moving on to 19B, and these are bills with active positions by the board. Mr. Polk.
All right, thank you. This is an informational item. Just a quick background. Assembly Bill 282 would revise Section 2914 of the Business Professions Code by adding language to allow applicants seeking licensure to be eligible to take the required licensure exams, which includes the EPPP and the CAPLE at any time after all academic coursework required for the qualifying doctoral degree is completed. In addition, the bill would require the board to revise California Code Regulation 1388 and 1388C to remove the requirements of completing the qualified supervised professional experience hours in order to be eligible to take the licensure exams. On April 7th, the board adopted an opposed unless amended position. The proposed amendment was to add as specified by the board to Section D of the proposed language. On April 12th, a position letter was submitted to the Assembly Committee on Appropriations. And on April 20th, the bill was ordered to a consent calendar. On April 24th, a floor alert with the board's position was submitted to the Assembly members. On April 27th, the bill passed the Assembly and was then ordered to the Senate. On May 10th, the bill was referred to the Senate Committee on Business and Professions and Economic Development. And on May 12th, an opposed unless amended position letter was submitted to the Senate on Business Professions and Economic Development. And at this time, the board is continuing to monitor the bill as it makes its way through the committees. That concludes my presentation on that item, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Any board members with questions or comments for this item? Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly, we've opened up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If you'd like to make a comment on the legislation, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon. And our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 19B2, AB 883. Mr. Polk, please.
Yes, thank you. This is an informational item regarding AB 883. Brief background, the bill was introduced on February 14th of this year. The bill would allow boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs to expedite the initial licensure process for an applicant who supplies satisfactory evidence to the board that the applicant is currently enrolled in the U.S. Department of Defense's Skill Bridge program. On April 7th, the board adopted a support position. On April 12th, the board submitted a support position letter to the Assembly Committee on Appropriations. On April 19th, the bill made its way through the Appropriations Committee, and we were notified that yesterday, on May 18th, the bill was amended to include the proposed language that the expedite would then take effect on or after July 1st, 2024. And at the time, the bill passed the Appropriations Committee. Currently, the board, there hasn't been any further movement on the bill. However, the board is still continuing to monitor the bill for any additional amendments as it makes its way through the different committees. That concludes my presentation on item 19B2, and I am open for questions.
Thank you so much. Any board member comment for 19B2? Seeing no hands, Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly, and we're opening the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If you've got a comment on the legislation discussed, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on the legislation proposed? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment box?
Yes, please. And
Thank
thank you. We're moving on to 19B3, AB 996. Pope. Mr. Pope, please. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, this is an informational item on Assembly Bill 996. The bill was introduced on February 15th. The bill proposes that boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs develops and maintains a conflict of interest policy that would discourage the qualification of any continuing education course if the provider of that course has an economic interest or commercial product or enterprise directly or indirectly promoted in that course. On April 7th, the board adopted an opposed position on AB 996. On April 14th, the board submitted a position letter to the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions. The bill passed the Committee on Business and Professions, and on April 26th, it was referred to the Committee on Appropriations. On May 17th, 2023, the bill passed the Committee on Appropriations. At this time, the board is continuing to monitor AB 996 for additional amendments and as it makes its way through the different committees through the Assembly. That concludes my background in status update on item 19B3.
Thank you. Any board comment or questions for Mr. Polk at this time? Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment for 19B3?
Certainly, and we've opened up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate comment. Any comments on the legislation discussed can be made by clicking on the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and call-in users can raise their hand by pressing *3. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall we close public comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Next item is 19B4, SB 372, and Mr. Polk.
Thank you again. Yes, this is an informational item as well. SB 372 was introduced on February 9th. The bill would require each licensing board under the Department of Consumer Affairs to update a licensee or registrant's legal name and or gender when the board receives government issued documentation. The bill would prohibit the board from charging a higher fee or for reissuing a document with a corrected or updated legal name or gender upon request. On March 20th, 23, the bill was amended to include that for licensees or registrants that are changing name and gender, the board will be required to remove the former name or gender from the online licensing verification system and treat the former name or gender as confidential or private information. The board would also be required to establish a process to allow a person to request and obtain the information. The board would also be required to establish a process to allow a person to submit a request to obtain the information. On April 7th this year, the board adopted an opposed position on SB 372. On April 14th, the board submitted an opposed position letter to the Senate Committee on Judiciary and also provided testimony at the April 18th hearing at the Judiciary Committee. On April 20th, the bill was amended. The amended were to section 27.5A2 to include the board shall establish a process for providing a licensee or registrant's current name or enforcement action record linked to a former name upon receipt of a request that is related to an enforcement action. The process shall ensure that the request is completed within 10 business days. This section shall be implemented in compliance with the Public Records Act. And the bill at that time was also referred to the Committee on Appropriations. On April 26th, the board submitted a opposed position letter to the Committee on Appropriations. Yesterday, May 18th, the bill passed the Committee on Appropriations. And I believe currently the bill has been referred to the Senate floor at this time. Also, there is a meeting scheduled on May 31st with the Author's Office sponsors and with the DCA Legislative Affairs Division and the affected boards to discuss the bill and propose amendments, and also to include technical support regarding the concerns with the bill that certain boards have. At this time, the board is continuing to monitor the bill, and the proposed amendments have come through during the different committees. And the SB 372 will also be discussed again at the Legislative and Regulations Committee on June 16th. And that concludes my status update on item 19B4.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any board comment on SB 372? Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly. And we've opened up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If anyone has any comment on this item, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or you can raise your hand by clicking once on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. We do have a hand raised from Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, I'm going to send you a request to unmute, and then you'll have 2 minutes with a 30-second warning.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Alley with CPA again, and we are one of the co-sponsors for this legislation for SB 372, and we're looking forward to the meeting later this month to discuss and address the board concerns. Some boards are supportive, some, BOP is opposed, and so hopefully the conversation with DCA will be productive and address this board's concerns, and maybe we can get you to a neutral position as the bill continues to move forward on this critical issue. Thank you.
Thank you, and I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for the public comment. It's 3:17. let's take a little break until 3:30 and we will resume with 19C. Thank you. Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Welcome back. Kasuga,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Harb Sheets,
Here.
Nystrom. I'm sorry, what, Nystrom?
Here.
Thank you. Sorry, it cut out there for a sec. Rogers,
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you. Quorum is established, and we will jump right back into agenda item 19C. And Mr. Polk.
Yes, thank you. This is a possible action item, which staff requests board members to review the attachments and may consider a position on SB 373. SB 373, this bill would prohibit the board from disclosing the full address of record, also known as the AOR, on the internet of licensees and registered psychological associates. The bill would allow the board to only disclose the city, state, county, and zip code of the AOR. On April 7th, SB 373 was presented at that board meeting, and the motion for the board to adopt a support position did not pass. On April 12th, the bill passed the Senate Committee on Business, Professions, Economic, and Development Committee. On April 19th, the bill passed. The bill then passed the Senate Committee on Appropriations. On April 20th, the bill was amended to include the language that states the board shall establish a process for providing a licensee or registrant's complete address upon receipt of a request that is related to a court proceeding against or request for records from the licensee or registrant. The process shall ensure that the request is completed within 10 business days. The subdivision shall be implemented in compliance with the California Public Records Act. On May 8th, after going through the committees, the bill was then ordered to the Assembly. And yesterday, May 18th, the bill was referred to the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions. And that concludes my presentation on item 19C1 SB 373.
Thank you. Any board comment or questions? I'm not seeing any hands. Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment for this item?
Certainly. We've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If anyone would like to make a comment, they can raise their hand or they can click on the question mark icon, type the word comment, and click send. We do have a request to comment from Jennifer Alley. And Jennifer, I'm going to send you a request to unmute yourself. You'll have 2 minutes with a 30-second warning.
Hello again, this is Jennifer Alley with CPA. We are one of the co-sponsors of this important legislation. The board also would impact licensees at the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and the bill is co-sponsored by the associations representing LPCCs, marriage and family therapists, social workers, and CBHA, which represents county behavioral health nonprofit agencies. And we're pursuing this legislation because a lot of providers since the pandemic have really shifted the delivery of care to a telehealth model, and just don't have offices to have an address on the website. We are aware that, a PO box can be provided to their licensing board, but post office boxes, by the United States Postal Service just aren't that available. And so, a lot of our members have had to go to private PO boxes, which are extremely expensive. And some of the more urban areas of the state costing over $1,000 a year. And so, the reasons that, a psychologist may not want to have their address be public is they may be working with the Department of Corrections, which is actually, increasing utilization of telehealth in the governor's May
30
budget
seconds.
this year. And they may be working with the courts. And so there are just reasons why it's important for their addresses to be private, but we really want to maintain their safety and reduce their business costs of not requiring having to have a PO box. And so I really hope that you can take the rationale behind the bill into consideration and move forward with your support this today. So thank you.
And I do not see any other requests for comment at this time. Shall we close public comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, Mr. Polk, we are watching this bill, but we have not taken a position. And so if the board wanted to take a position at this time, this would be the appropriate time to do so.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm bringing it back to the board for any discussion or comments. Or we can continue watching this bill. I'm seeing no hands, but I'll scroll through. Okay, looks like we are going to continue watching this bill, Mr. Polk. Let's move on to item 19D. And Mr. Polk, I have you down for that one as well. Is that correct?
Yes,
Perfect.
thank you. This is regarding Senate Bill 815. This is an action item with a staff recommendation to support SB 815 if amended to included a delayed implementation until January 1st of 2025 for provisions related to research psychoanalysis. The bill was introduced on February 17th. The bill would make various changes to the medical board by the legislator through the sunset process. Section 10 of the bill would transfer the registration, regulations, and enforcement of research psychoanalysis from the medical board to the Board of Psychology. The bill would transfer fund collected from the licensees and regulations of research psychoanalysis and from the medical board to the Board of Psychology. On April 26th, the bill passed the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development. On May 1st, the bill was referred to the Senate Appropriations Committee. And on May 2nd, board staff met with the medical board and expressed our request for a delayed implementation, which would be needed for the provisions related to the research psychoanalysis and the transitioning to the Board of Psychology. And on yesterday, May 18th, the bill then passed the Senate Committees on Appropriation. And at this time, board staff is continuing to monitor the bill. And that includes my presentation on item 19D1.
Thank you. I'm opening this up to the board for comments, questions, possible motion. I'm scrolling slowly.
Okay, this is Dr. Harpsheets. I see on page 428 of the combined packet that the board staff will give us more detailed cost estimates at a later date. So when might we expect that cost information? I think about that in terms of we've got the testing technicians that we will have to integrate, I presume, into the licensing section, and that this would be something else that would be integrated into the licensing section, if I'm thinking about it correctly. And we've been really working around, processing times, and so I just want to be really aware. So do we still, Mr. Polk, have time to get that before this goes too far?
Yes, I believe so. I believe there should be enough time in order, because we've reached out to medical board and to budgets to see what their actual cost is currently for them to administer this registration. So we're working with them and getting that information, and once that information is available, it will then be passed on to see what their current costs are to, like I said, to administer this registration.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Dr. Harpsheets, is that it?
I know, I'm still trying. It's like I keep clicking and it just doesn't come down. So yes, it's just, I'm trying to get it down.
Okay. Let's see. Ms. Moderator, can we open up public comment at this time for this item?
Certainly. And we've opened up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If anyone has a comment on this item, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. We do have a request for comment. We'll start with Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes with a 30-second warning.
Hello, Elizabeth Winkleman, again with the California Psychological Association. I just had a quick question, which is, do you know how many research psychoanalysts there are that are currently regulated under the Board of Medicine? Just wondering how big a group this would be. Thank you.
And then our next request for comment is a raised hand from Jennifer Alley. And Jennifer, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. And again, you'll have 2 minutes with a 30-second warning.
Thank you, moderator. This is Jennifer Alley again with the California Psychological Association. I'm also curious to know what the staffing requirements are at the other board for managing this population, and what is it going to mean in terms of workload for department staff, and will, I guess, the medical board staff, I don't know, be transferring over to the board to maintain the workload? So any information on that would also be helpful and appreciated.
And I do not see any other requests for comment at this time. Shall we close public comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And if there is board staff available to answer the 2 public comment questions, that would be great.
So looking at page 427 of the combined packet at the beginning of the analysis, the medical board provided for the DCA annual report to the legislature that they have 86 research psychoanalysts currently. They processed 8 new applications in fiscal year 21-22 and issued 11 new registrations and renewed 63 registrations. So if that's helpful data, it was my understanding that years ago when we discussed this, because it was such a small workload for the board, that the licensing staff for their physician and surgeon's license, those analysts had just absorbed the workload of this group.
Thank you, Ms. Sorek. Any other board comment or questions before we move on? Oh, Mr. Fu.
Thank you. Madam President, when you say before we move on, do you mean move on to the next item?
Yes.
Okay, so before we do, Mr. Polk, I think I'm reading here that you're requesting that the board take a support, excuse me, that the board take a support position if the bill is amended to include delayed implementation until January 1st. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's the staff recommendation to support SB 815 if it's amended to include a delayed implementation until January 1st, 2025.
Understood. Thank you so much. And so I just want to check in before we move on that, Madam Chair, if are there board members who will be making that motion?
I've asked a few times. I don't think there are. So if you would like to, this would be your opportunity.
I'm happy to make the motion to support AB 815, if amended to include delay implementation until January 1st for provisions related to research psychoanalysts.
I second it. This is Dr. Kasuga.
Perfect. We have a motion and a second. Any other? Oh,
I'm sorry, Dr. Tate. Mr. Fu, did you say AB 815 or is it SB 815?
It's SB 815. I'm sorry, I used AB when I was in SB.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Nystrom, do you have a comment?
Yes, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote. I was under the impression it was information.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before I open up public comment? Dr. Rogers, do you have another comment, or is that a late hand?
Oh, I am so sorry. It's just lingering there. Thank you.
Got it. Perfect. Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly. And we've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If anyone would like to make a comment on the motion, you can look for the question mark icon and type the word comment and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and the call-in users can raise their hand by pressing *3. Are there any comments? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have a motion on the floor. Any other board comment before we call the roll? Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Suga.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Barb Sheets.
Aye.
Thank you. Nystrom recusal. Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. And now we are moving on to the next item, which is 19E, legislative items for future meetings. The board may discuss other items of legislation in sufficient detail to determine whether such items should be on a future board meeting agenda and/or whether to hold a special meeting of the board to discuss such items. So I'm going to open this up to the board members initially. Dr. Rogers.
Yes, I would just like to put on the agenda for future meetings an update from HCI about their education capacity expansion programs to include psychologists.
Thank you, and we'll put that on. So this is for legislative items.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I jumped ahead.
You are, but you're close. It's coming up.
Okay, I'm getting there.
So
Okay.
hold on to it. Any other board members with legislative items for the future? Okay, can we open this up for public comment, Ms. Moderator?
Certainly. And we've got the WebEx Q&A feature open for public comment. If anyone has any suggestions of legislative items for future meetings, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and calling users can use *3 to raise their hand. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall we close the public comment again?
Yes, and thank you very much.
You're
I'm just
welcome.
going to ask the board one more time if anyone has a lingering legislative item. Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Let's move on to agenda item 20. This is regulatory update, review, and consideration of additional actions. Oops. I'm sorry, Mr. Gardner, is it you?
Yes, it is me. Good afternoon, board members. So what I'm proposing, this is the inactive psychological associates registration and reactivation of a psychological associate registration. The proposed language allows a psychological associate to request that the board place their active registration in an inactive status. In addition, the proposed regulations would allow the board to place the registration in an inactive status when the registration has no primary supervisor. While the registration is in an inactive status, it will stop the time counting towards the cumulative total of 6 years registration limitation. The board is also proposing the adoption of a process for reactivating an inactive psychological associate registration. So board staff have already prepared all the necessary regulatory documents for submission for the initial department review. However, board counsel reported that the board has not voted to adopt the current version of the language, and therefore staff is requesting the board review and approve the language in attachment A, and that would be the attachment A in your hand carry documents. So the action requested is that the board review the new language for additional edits or approval and addition, and authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process and set the matter for hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking, including making any technical or non-substantive changes to the package, and adopt the proposed regulations as noticed. So again, the proposed language is in the hand carry attachment A, which has the highlights with the additional language that was recommended.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Ms. Sorick. Oh, Ms. Sorick, was your hand not up?
Oh, I was talking to myself. It looks like we might need to get the right version that was provided in the hand carry to pull up. So if Mr. Gardner, if you can forward that document over to Mr. Gage, then we can get that up for any potential changes. I just wanted to add a slight bit of context to the discussion. This is a regulatory package that the board approved back in 2018. And the reason why it had been lagging a bit was because we were trying to wait until the psychological associate regulatory package was moving farther in the process so that there wouldn't be any issues with a couple of the provisions that may not have been in regulatory agreement. So that's why we held on to the package. But since waiting for that package, which was approved to go further in the process, There have been some changes made at Office of Administrative Law as far as acceptable language and formatting. And now we have a new regulatory counsel with Ms. Albo. So she took a fresh look at the language, and because her recommendations were substantive, that's why you're taking a look at this language now. So I just wanted to add that slight bit for context, and now you can discuss the language.
Sorry, I was talking to myself also. It looks like Mr. Fu has a comment or question.
Yes, I was gonna make the motion that Mr. Gardner described.
I will second it. This is Dr. Kasuga.
I'll also say I'm open to any changes that Ms. Ang will recommend because I know she makes really good motions.
This is regulatory, so I defer to Ms. Halbo on any.
Is that motion appropriate enough for us to move forward? Ms. Halpo?
Yeah, the motion is fine. You would just say so moved, and
Right.
that's what he's done, more or less.
Yes, I agree. Let's see, any other board comment regarding the motion before we open up for public comment? Okay, Mr. Fu, I'm ignoring your hand, but tell me if I shouldn't be. Okay. Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly. And we've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If anyone would like to make a comment on the text, you may look for the question mark icon, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 2 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments at this point? I do not see any comments. Requests for comments. Shall we close public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Yes. Item is coming back to the board. Any last minute comments or questions? Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Yes.
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Barb Sheets,
Aye.
Ms. Nystrom, will you be recusing yourself on this item?
It's regulatory, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
No, I can vote. Aye.
Okay. Aye. Great. Thank you. Rogers,
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion passes. For item 20B, we'll be deferring this. Oh, did
I
someone
was
say
just
something?
going to say, Dr. Tate, this is Dr. Harp Sheets.
Yes.
I need to leave the meeting for 10 minutes. I will let you know when I come back.
Okay, thank you. I was just saying that item 20B will be deferred into our August meeting, which leaves us with 20C, Mr. Gardner. And if you're speaking, you might be on mute.
Sorry, this
Madam-
one goes
Oh.
back to Mr. Polk.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Please.
No worries. This is just an informational item for the regulatory package related to pathways to licensure. The regulatory package would streamline the licensure process and removes unnecessary barriers for applicants and the supervisors who support them in their training. Currently, this package is in the drafting phase. This phase includes preparation of the regulatory package and collaborative review by board staff and legal counsel. Concludes my presentation on item 20C.
Thank you very much. Any board comment or questions for Mr. Polk regarding item 20C? Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly, and we have open public comment for the pathways to licensure items. If anyone would like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Item 20D, Mr. Polk.
Yes, thank you. This also is an informational item regarding the regulatory package review of the enforcement provisions. This regulatory package would update the board's enforcement provisions for the listed sections. This package currently is in the drafting phase as well, which includes the preparation of the package itself and collaborative review by board staff and legal counsel. And that includes the presentation on item 20D.
Thank you. Any board comment or questions for Mr. Polk regarding 20D?
Dr. Tate, this is Dr. Harpsheets. I'm back, just letting you know.
Thank you. Welcome back. Any comments or questions for Mr. Polk regarding item 20D? Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment for this item? Oh, Dr. Harpsheets, is that? Oh, never mind. The hand went away.
It just doesn't want to work. I don't know why.
This is the moderator, and we've opened up public comment for the most recent item. If you have a comment you'd like to make, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. This is concerning the enforcement provisions. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
We're moving on to item 20E, Mr. Polk.
Thank you. This also too is the informational item. This is regarding the regulatory package for corporations, which would update the board's requirements for professional corporations and their provisions. Like the last two packages, this one's currently in the drafting phase as well. That includes the preparation of the package and collaborative reviews by board staff and legal counsel at this time.
Thank you very much. Board comment, questions for Mr. Polk regarding item 20E. Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment?
Certainly, we've opened up public comment for a regulatory update on corporations. If you'd like to make a comment, look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes.
Thank you.
Agenda item 21. Recommendations for agenda items for future board meetings. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. I'm going to open up the board at this time. Any comments or suggestions? And I think Dr. Rogers already had one, but this is your time now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tate. So now that I'm in the proper part of the agenda, I would like to get an update from HCI on their education capacity expansion programs specifically related to psychologists. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to say that's Dr. Horn I see, but I'll wait until public comment. Any other board members?
Dr. Tate, I know it's baked in, but I just wanted to make sure that we have our ongoing mindfulness activity to start our board meeting.
Absolutely. Dr. Rogers knows it's on there.
Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder.
I'll be ready. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, we will anticipate it. Any other board members? Perfect. Ms. Moderator, can you please open up public comment? And I see Dr. Horn has her hand up, so this may be the perfect time for her to make a suggestion.
Lee,
Am I okay?
go for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tate. Yeah, I was anticipating and I got my hand up a little early, so I'm sorry about that. Dr. Rogers, I'm following you. So anyway, I would like to bring up something I just want to give you that I'd like y'all to consider. And I think this will be brought to the board at your August meeting by Gilbert Newman, Dr. Gilbert Newman. Since California isn't participating in SIPAC, just to give you a little bit of history, the training community, particularly, training health service psychologists, doctoral programs in health service psychology, as y'all know, with all the mental health needs of that have really increased, and I think especially during COVID, the mental health needs also of psychology graduate students has also increased. And rather than see people among their faculty, which is left to a lot of students to do, or people that they know are going to run into, or maybe supervisors of them at a later date. The training community has partnered with SIPAC, and psychologists who are members of SIPAC can volunteer to give very low cost therapy, $25 or less a session, to graduate students in psychology. Because we don't participate in SIPAC, Dr. Newman has been working on something like this for California, and we'd like to bring it to the board for y'all to discuss the possibilities of something like this for California. Does that make sense?
Yes, I hear you, but and it sounds like we're receiving that presentation soon, correct?
At your next board meeting, I guess that's in August.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd like to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Ms. Sorek, I don't know if they're on the agenda, but you hear Dr. Horn's request to hopefully be on that agenda?
Yes, and if Dr. Horn can follow up with an email, I'll make sure it gets included in the meeting agenda. And also who would be presenting that item. I think you said Dr. Newman.
Yes, Dr. Newman will be presenting it.
Okay.
I'll be happy to send something formal, or he probably will.
Yeah, just to, align to my email, just to remind me to
Okay.
make sure I get that on the August agenda.
Okay, will do. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr.
Absolutely.
Horn.
And Dr. Rogers, if I can also have you just send an email follow-up with exactly what you would like me to request from HCI, because I've got a couple of follow-ups from them to make sure they include in their August presentation.
Absolutely, no problem at all.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
And now this is the moderator, and we are now accepting any other suggestions for agenda items for future board meetings. As usual, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, or calling users can press *3. And each person will have 2 minutes to make the suggestion for the future agenda item. And I do not see any raised hands or requests for comment. Shall I close that comment feature?
Yes, please, and thank you. The next agenda item is the closed session spiel that I usually do. But before I say this, I wanted to give Ms. McCochran just a minute to talk about CPD with regards to this meeting, if she's available.
Yes.
Perfect.
So for attending this board meeting today, you will receive 6 CPD hours for your participation under CPD category number 1, attendance at a Board of Psychology meeting. For your records, please note today's date as May 19th, 2023, the name of today's meeting, which is board meeting, and 6 CPD hours. And if you called in, please email bopce@dca.ca.gov with your license number and the phone number used. Back to you, Dr. Tate.
Thank you so much for giving us that great information. Agenda item number 22. The board will meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, subdivision C3, to discuss disciplinary matters, including proposed decisions, stipulations, petitions for reinstatement or modification of penalty, petitions for reconsideration, and remands. Just to let everyone know, we will be adjourning from closed session. We will not be returning back to open session at all. This concludes our meeting for today. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you at a future meeting.